Hello, everybody. Today, Taylor Valladares. Happy Pride. I am Kai the Cutie Pie. Thank you for following. The Same Mo Kid. Thank you for subscribing for 6 months in a row. Goodness gracious. Happy Pride. Happy Pride Nitric Oxide. Oh no, I didn't know. I didn't know Jack interviewed Taylor. I'll have to check that out. Tears of Trump preachers this month. Oh, just like people who are way into Trump? Yes, that has been very validating to watch unfold. Yay, Robin. I'm glad you can make it. Did I get that strike? No, I did not get a strike. I had a pretty good yeah, I took down the offending content and I edited out, so I'm not too worried about getting a strike. I am. You can still see it, but I have bug bites from my cloud cosplay photo shoot I did. Valkiznaha, thank you very much for the algorithmic content. Happy Pride. Pride Month luck, hopefully. Oh yeah, Vision Cliff. I've been vicariously living for knowledge fight stuff lately because they've done such a great job of keeping up with all things info warriors. Apparently pronoun. Yeah. No, I saw heel versus babyface being mad that they made women hot, and let me tell you. Okay, I was actually thinking about this today because there are very few games that I'm like. I talked about it a couple weeks ago when I did basically the Assassin's Creed video. That was kind of my like farewell to the idea of continuing to cover the culture war grifters after Stellar Blade and everything. It's just it's the same shit over and over, right? Like it is some and we're seeing it in real time. In real time, in the last couple days, they've hopped from Silent Hill. They hopped right off of that to the Call of Duty trans skins, or the LGBT skins for the Call of Duty guns, and then they fucking dropped that as soon as the Acolyte dropped, as the Star Wars, and of course they're going to complain about that. And so it's just like it's been so transparent. But the thing is, and I'm probably not going to do a video on it because I feel like I've already missed like the window to do it. But if they continue to talk shit about Silent Hill, which they so clearly know nothing about, I am going to go off. I'm going to lose my fucking mind. I will like just be forced through compulsion to create a essay debunking and deconstructing all of them and how they don't know what the fuck they're ever talking about. It's so clear just from the way heel versus babyface and Asmon and everybody else talk about the Silent Hill 2 issue that they know fuck all about the franchise. And there are a couple franchises I will get up in arms like this over. Like I love a lot of like there's some big franchises I love or near and dear to my heart like everybody else. Oh, the sticker is peeling. No. But Silent Hill is in a tier with like Devil May Cry, where I was a hardcore fan of those things when nobody else was. Like when nobody else was. And that's not to be like gatekeepy in terms of like, okay, well, I liked it or I liked it before it was cool or anything. but it means I've been around those franchises and I've been around those stories and those characters, and they've come to mean a lot to me. So when people basically purposefully completely misunderstand them and make no effort to understand them, it was like when Short Fat Otaku made the video about how I made the quick reaction to the conservative games list, and he went into his research on Silent Hill and like debunking me was to when I had referenced Silent Hill 3 being a game about essentially eschewing gender norms from a culturally like Christian context, which it is an incredibly feminist game. Dog, what are you doing? My dog is just licking the sleeve of my little... Hello. Okay, dog wants to say hi. Come say hi. Come say hi. You come on stream? Okay. What? Hello. 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 Jackie Sins, thank you. Holy cow, for 50 smackers. Happy Pride. Happy Pride to you, too. Thank you so much. I just got my hair did. Okay, lady is happy. She has been given pets. What was I saying? Silent Hill. And like you can tell that he doesn't have any like that he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, because he started talking about like you can tell he looked up Silent Hill basically on like Wikipedia or some shit, because he started talking about how Silent Hill was based in Centralia, which is something any Silent Hill fan can tell you is bullshit. That doesn't apply to the games. It was made up for the movie. And that is the kind of thing that you hear all the fucking time. Like there are little tells for when people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And most people don't know them if they aren't actively in those communities, if they haven't been actively in those communities for years and years. And seeing people like Heel vs. Babyface and Asmon talk about how, oh, well, mostly guys play this game, which is why they like hot women. It's like, you're not going to fucking sit there and tell me that only guys play Silent Hill and Resident Evil, when the biggest content creators in those communities, the people who have kept interest in those games alive, the people who have been making intensively researched video essays, have been queer and trans and women of all stripes. Like if you're sitting here, your little armchair game critic bullshit, and being like, yeah, only like just because I played Silent Hill 2 back on the PS2 20 fucking years ago, and I know nothing about the rest of the series, and I play one horror game a year, and you go, yeah, well, most guys are mostly people who play horror games. It's like, fuck off, shut up. Ugh, sorry. I'm already. Yeah, somebody, if people are just coming into the stream now, somebody got me started on Heel versus Babyface talking shit about Silent Hill 2, the remake. And the problem is, here's the real problem, is because, naturally, it's a nuanced issue, is they want to, as we say it with me again, class, because we've talked about it a lot on stream, they want simple problems, or simple solutions to complex problems. Like, that is how the grift works, right? They want to sell you a villain that you can blame for something that is much more complicated. And so they want to say, oh, well, all the problems with Silent Hill 2 Remake are because of wokeness. And it's like, no, the things that people actually look at in the Silent Hill 2 Remake are like, the combat's not right. Like go back and watch the stream. I was reacting to it. Like, you can go watch the trailer and me reacting to it in real time, being like, I don't know why they changed this. I don't like that they changed this. It's all to do with the fucking gameplay. The fact that they are latching onto it, they made this character woke, shows not only, oh my God, okay, it's a perfect microcosm of how their knee-jerk reaction to criticism is so stupid, and why it's so stupid. Because the two characters that they complain about, of being, they wokeified them, are not for, like, in two opposite directions, are not for the reasons that they're saying. Because Maria is meant to be a sexual character, and she is not in their way sexual. Like, she is not like Eve from Stellar Blade. She is not bearing a lot of cleavage. She is flirty. She is kind of sensuous. She is vaguely like succubus coded, right? Like, she is not actually sexualized, but her personality comes through in her appearance. And the problem with the new design is that it is incredibly plain compared to her original design, and that design was very intentional, right? So that is, in one direction, that goes against their narrative of like, oh, woke is making everything less sexy. It's like, yeah, actually, this is a case of something being toned down, but also not in the way that you think, because you don't like have the capacity to understand why that character was designed that way. And then you have the other side. Speaking of not understanding why characters are designed that way, you have the character that everybody is saying, that people like Heel vs. Babyface and Asmongold are saying, well, yeah, they made this character less sexy. Who is, for everybody who doesn't know, in Silent Hill 2. Okay. So, if you don't know Silent Hill 2, I'm gonna illuminate you. Silent Hill 2 is a psychological horror game where you are drawn to the mysterious town of Silent Hill. As the main character, James, you are drawn there after you receive a letter from your dead wife telling you to come to a special place, a place that was special to both of you. Along the way, this town that otherwise appears to be abandoned / infested with horrible monsters, you find two other people, only two other people wandering the town, Angela and Eddie. And both of them, as their stories unfold alongside yours, appear to be fighting their own kinds of trauma. And so they are essentially also people who have been drawn into the town to deal with their own issues. Angela is the character that they are complaining about not being sexy enough. In the original, Angela Orozco was never meant to be sexy or attractive. She was meant to just look normal. She was meant to look like a regular woman. The thing about Angela that makes it especially fucking gross, why they would try and want her sexualized, is that her particular trauma revolves around being abused by her father, sexually abused by her father. There is a boss, spoilers for Silent Hill 2, I guess, late into the game. And again, these are things that every culture war grifter who's making a fucking video saying that, like, oh, of course they want to make characters less sexy in this game. They have never played this far into the game, and if they did, they could not comprehend very basic horror symbolism, by the way. There is a boss partway through the game where, and here, let me make sure there we go. There's a boss about, I would say, 4/5 through the game that you fight because Angela is unable to. You fight the physical manifestation of her abuser. You fight the I think the abstract daddy is the name of the character. Am I getting it wrong? I'm gonna look like an idiot if I'm getting that wrong. Oh, dude, I'm so fucking money. Absolutely right. Now, the thing about the abstract daddy is that Angela can't fight it because throughout the entire game, she seems to be going in and out of this kind of age-regressive limbo where her vernacular changes, where she will refer to things in almost an infantile way, where she will, like, she'll call her dad and mom mommy and papa and but correct herself. And you get to this point and she physically cannot fight anymore because she has a panic attack basically and shuts down entirely, leaving James to try and defend her. This isn't now. That's one issue with Angela and trying to sexualize her. The other issue with trying to sexualize Angela Orozco is that her trauma manifests itself through her explicitly being suicidal. The first time you meet her is in the graveyard. The second time you meet her is in the apartment building, which is the iconic shot of her sitting in front of a mirror, twirling a knife in her hand. And she is babbling nonsense, and James takes the knife from her, as just a tell you what, let me hold on to that, and then Angela goes on her way. That knife is an item that you can look at throughout the game, and if James observes it enough times, it gives him a worse ending, with the implicit, the meta text there being that James is considering suicide the same way Angela was. The last time you meet Angela, and this is, again, these are the iconic moments that people love this game for. And this is the burning staircase, which I'm very excited to see, because it's a heartrending moment. It's so good. I pray they can do it justice. The last time you meet Angela, it is essentially implied that she kills herself. She walks up a burning staircase, turning away from James, and James offers to help her, and she turns away and walks up the staircase as it's consumed by flames. So, not only is the character that people like heel versus babyface are complaining isn't sexy enough, not only is she a 19-year-old sexual abuse trauma survivor who still has panic attacks and is stricken by grief over what happened to her, but she is heavily suicidal, and it is implied she kills herself at the end of the game. That is who these people think isn't fuckable enough. And never once do they stop to think, geez, maybe that's because the intent of the character isn't just to be fuckable. I know that's a radical concept for these dorks who think literally every woman is just there to be gooner bait for them in media. It's a real shocker, I know. But it's just like, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much, Lily TTV. And it's less that. Here's the thing. I sincerely don't believe that most of the people complaining about it know this stuff about the game. Because if you actually knew that there is nobody, not even on their side, if they knew that about Angela, if they had that information in front of them, they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But the way that they give up the grift is that they don't know. They hear through the grapevine. They see on social media, somebody says, oh, look, they made this character look different. And boom, that's a YouTube video for them. That's something that they can give their audience to feed on for a week until the Star Wars show fucking drops, and they can, have their checks for the next month complaining about how this actress said something woke. And it's just like, it's vile. Like, it's really fucking vile. Anywho, that was my Bratty, I tend to wonder if they believe the shit they say or if it's just for clout and a paycheck. I think it's mostly just for clout and a paycheck. Like, I think they have at least deluded themselves into believing that, like, oh, wokeness is ruining everything. Like, I think they have a baseline of belief that they follow, but insofar as they believe how it applies to everything, I don't think they have like the ability to have that nuance. They don't want to have a conversation like this. They don't want to have a conversation about like, okay, no, actually a lot of the fan base are worried because Bloober Team, the people who are handling Silent Hill 2 and remaking this game that has so much amazing dramatic weight, it has so much rich subtext, it has so much depth to its storytelling. The problem with that is that Bloober Team have absolute ham hands when it comes to handling anything with nuance. Like they are some of the most unsubtle storytellers I've ever seen. And also the entire debacle with the medium and how it portrays abuse survivors is like fucking mind-boggling. And like that's the real thing. Like that's the real issue that a lot of people have with the development. Majestic Spider-Man. Hi, Majestic Spider-Man. Alrighty. Now I'm on the Abstract Daddy page. Yeah. Growing up as a child, Angela suffered horrific sexual abuse from her father and brother. Timid and severely traumatized as a result, Angela eventually stabbed her father in the throat after a failed attempt to run away from home, and later killed her brother by unknown means. However, her actions left her in an intense state of guilt and self-blame. As she contemplated suicide, her damaged psyche drew her to the town of Silent Hill, Maine, where the darkest parts of her psyche were manifested into monsters and nightmarish delusions made real by the town. Like, that's the character that they're like, yeah, she's not fuckable enough. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Oh, yeah, New Fall, Air Ramahi. So for some people who know, of course, Lady, the dog who popped on the stream earlier. Sorry, I'm really congested today for some reason. Lady is fine. I think she's been acting a little bit down. For those who don't know, about 2 days ago, I had to take the dog to the pet ER because she was doing this thing that I had never seen her do before, and it was freaking me the hell out. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, she was doing this like she was essentially nodding over and over. And it wasn't like I checked her mouth, I checked her throat, like it wasn't like she had anything stuck. She was doing it, she was like trying to lay down and trying to walk around, and it was still happening, and it like came and went in intensity. Like it would be like harder and then less hard, and then it would go harder again. So it freaked me the fuck out, because I'm hypersensitive about my animals. I had a cat about 6 years ago now, who passed away very suddenly. A feral cat that I had taken in as a kitten and raised for about 6 years, who just suddenly died one day. Had a seizure that left him paralyzed and had to be put down. So I am, because of that kind of traumatic experience, I am hypersensitive to my animals and their health. So we took her to the pet emergency, and basically what they said is that she probably has what are called head tremors, and there's another more technical name for it. But what it essentially amounts to is very likely, like, nobody really knows what causes them. It's not neurological, so she's not necessarily losing like balance or focus or vision. It's not an actual seizure. But what it is the way the doctor explained it to me, because the doctor who I spoke to actually had a golden retriever who suffered something similar, and it's very common in boxer and lab breeds, which Lady has a little bit of both. And it essentially was put to me as like it's usually a stress response to, like, if something in the environment is stressing her out, we will like that is how it will manifest, like just this kind of like nervous stress release. And the doctor was like, oh, you know, is she bothered by like thunderstorms or anything, or weather? There was thunderstorms last night. And Lady has never been like, the dog is unflappable, like shit outside the window and stuff does not bother her, like she just doesn't care. So the only real explanation I'm left with is that it's my stress that's affecting her, because Lady is hyper empathetic and picks up on anytime there's something wrong with me. And so I am I think it is just my stress levels that have been affecting her, which is a, you know, that's a kind of a rough thing to hear, is that like my stress is making my dog sick. But she has been otherwise she has been pretty good. She did it a little bit when I got home. She did the head bobbing thing again, but I've been really trying to like we went for a nice 3-mile walk yesterday. I've been really trying to keep her active and keep her kind of distracted, and so far it's been working. Oh my goodness. Okay, a bunch of gifted. Oh, thank you, Jackie Sins, for gifting 5 dead domain subs. Thank you so much. Brutus Magnuson, Dither, Sean Davis, Aurora Sand, thank you so much. And Media Breakdown. Thank you all for joining the flock. And thank you. Somebody is saying my headphones are nice. These are actually broken, and you can't tell because of the power of Gorilla Glue. I think it's yeah, one of the sides is like has been snapped backwards for like a year and a half, and it's this one. Yeah, it's sealed up with Gorilla Glue. I am very much a use it till the wheels fall off kind of person. Y'all should see I have to throw it out now because I have actual tripods that work and shit. But the tripod I've been using for like, let me actually show you guys really quick, because up until recently this was the tripod I used for almost filming almost everything, and this is fucking gonna be nuts to you. Like, this is some MacGyver shit. Check this out. So this monstrosity right here, you can see that. So the way this works is this bundle of duct tape is attached to a phone holder I got from Rite Aid that broke immediately after I bought it, but I needed to make it work, so this is how it worked. It doesn't have any top part, so webcam was just resting on that for a little bit. And this part is actually, so somebody said what good condition it's in. It's not. 2 of these prongs, because this was, I bought this when I first started doing content, right? And I was stupid poor. And it was either off Amazon or off eBay. And it was one of the cheapest ones I could get. And I was like, okay, that's what I needed. The prongs in the middle broke almost immediately. The only thing keeping it all together is this massive wad of multiple, like this web of duct tape that I've completely Spider-Man'd across every like structural support to also keep this little dangly in here. And this, for those you guys want to see how I again, I use it till the wheels fall off. That is my MO. Here's my iPad I got. And I got my iPad probably in 2016, 2017. I don't know if y'all can see it. This is the edge of the iPad. It's had that crack there for about, that shatter for about a year now. And if you view it from the right angle when it's turned on, yeah, you can actually see, if you look at it from the right angle, you can see it when it lights up. You can see the light inside of it. Now, to do for example, my Matt Walsh videos, or any video really where I was reading from a script for an extended period of time, I would MacGyver these together and have to adjust it so that this iPad would have the script on it and the camera would be right above it. And so that is like if y'all thought my chair situation was bad, like I am like let it never be said I let shit go to waste. Lady Domina, if you really want, like, I will absolutely take, like, if you're serious, I will absolutely take that. Long live the dog. Flynn Vanessa, thank you very much for $2. Stephen Mystery, my wife left me because of woke. Graham Linehan, is that you? Thank you very much for the $2, Stephen Mystery. Have you ever played Gears of War? Oh, you're talking to Logan, not me. I'm like, honey, it's on my channel. Haven't been able to be here in a while. Missed the streams. I'm glad to have you, Leo BC. How often do you change your shelf setup? I do need to change it again. I've added some stuff. I've added, I just got this Metal Gear Solid 2 McFarlane Raiden. I picked that up from a shop for like $5 at a local shop. I got this Elvira comic at Comic-Con that I was at with my Cloud cosplay. That if you've seen me on Twitter, you've seen the Cloud Strife cosplay I finally did. Here's my Pride Elvira right here, and I've switched some stuff up. I have my Rogue back there, my X-Men 97 Rogue. I wanted to put my new Mondo Rogue back there, but it's too tall. It won't fit in the frame, so you're just looking at like her legs. Angel Dust sticker. Yeah, this is my little Angel Dust. I have an Angel Dust sticker, and then here's my Angel Dust little standee too that I got. And I've shown off part of my Angel Dust cosplay on Twitter. So if that's something y'all are into, I knew I subbed for a reason. A Spirit to Corpse. I'm also somebody who would rather do something jank than replace. I mean, I'm getting to a point where I think the next big thing is going to be the chair, because the chair is just, this chair is nonsense. It's so terrible. It's ridiculous. It really is. But after that, the next thing is going to be a nice new camera is a ways down the way. I think my camera right now is pretty good. And I think next I need a new computer. I need an actual PC. I've been using this laptop for going on 4 years now. Holy crap. Oh, thank you very much. Made a Twitter to follow me and boost my likes. Captain Lunar, thank you for super chatting $5. A buddy of mine was saying He-Man should be gay, but I disagree. Making pansexual He-Man being gay just canonized as a joke. That wasn't that funny. That sounds... Oh, God, I'm sorry. I just did that right in the mic. That sounds a lot like one of my favorite stand-up jokes that I pull out from time to time on He-Man. Okay. I forget why I wanted to... This one was to... Okay, yeah, all right. I will... This one I just used to actually get stuff. This is not the one I wanted to read from. Let's go... I don't know why this won't come up. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Just needed a proper kick in the butt. Oh, hello, dog. Hello, dog. Hey, puppy. Come here. Come on up. Come say hi. Hello. Dog says hello, everybody. Yes, I love you. I love you. Okay, she wants pets. Happy Pride. I'll be right back. I'm going to go clear my sinuses out, do some nose spray. That way I will not be sniffling right into the mic real quick. And then we will get started on, yeah, Logan Mansion Games. Everybody watch the She-Ra Netflix reboot. Big fan of, if you couldn't tell by the Double Trouble stuffy in the background. Big fan. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. We are ready. DD knows ASMR. No, thank you. No, thank you. So today I wanted to go through, this will be the first of a number of streams, and they will all be made into stream highlight videos. So if you miss any part of it, don't worry. This will all go up on the channel. To celebrate Pride, I wanted to go through something that I think a lot of us aren't aware of. Whether we've just come out, whether we've been out for a while, queer history is something that doesn't really get the attention it deserves. Often even by people who are queer, whether you're gay or lesbian, trans, non-binary, or none of those things at all, and just don't know that queer people have always been around, they've always existed, and they've always been in nearly every aspect of society. So what I wanted to go through today and in the coming weeks will be just examining different aspects of queer people throughout history, from specific examples to more broad examples. And I wanted to start with the Old West. Giddy up, yeehaw. Because the Old West is a incredibly important time, not just in American history, but in our national perception. The idea of the rugged American individualist comes from the Old West. And it's something that has been essentially claimed, for better or worse, and mostly worse, as the cowboy, or let me rephrase that. The cowboy has essentially been claimed as a symbol of straight white masculinity. The reality, however, might surprise you to know, could not be further from the truth. Not only were there a huge amount of people of color who made up cowboys throughout the 1800s and 1900s, but homosexuality and gender nonconformity was rampant through the West, from small towns to big cities, out on the range and back on the homestead. So what I wanted to do today was go through and talk about some of the stories of the people who, until recently, until historians discovered them, until we went back and acknowledged them, history had forgotten. And talk about queer history, I guess. Somebody in chat, Patrick Dune, John Ford and John Wayne are probably responsible for the modern cowboy image. I mean, they are... Well, John Ford was a director, and John Wayne is certainly like the archetypical, like very much the classic Hollywood cowboy. But I would say they're less responsible for it than marketing. Like they are both right place, right time responses to the idea of the cowboy as being a archetypical American rugged individualist, which of course came around in the 1940s and 50s in a post-World War II America, going into the Cold War where we needed that kind of symbolism, which is largely why you see a lot of that stuff in things like even Fallout. And it's not just because that iconography was hyper popular in the 1950s, but specifically because culturally it was used to reinforce the idea of American individualism and American exceptionalism. Excuse me. Steve White, the term cowboy was used more exclusively for black and Mexican or vaquero men. White men preferred the term cowhand. That's something many don't know. I did not know that. Thank you. Now, I wanted to go into this a little bit, and what I'm going to be doing is this is kind of going to be, I'm going to kind of treat this like a class. Or an online class or something, right? Where we're going to read a little bit from each source, not all of them. And then I want people to hopefully be interested enough to go and seek that information out on their own, or go and look at the people that I mentioned, or go and look at the sources and dig into this history a little bit more. So what we're going to be doing is going from source to source, much like I did for my, if you watched the video I did on Project 2025, much like I did for the Project 2025 stream. Pet Dogma, we'll talk about Harry Allen. Yeah, we're absolutely talking about Harry Allen. Harry Allen's, what a boss. Numbnuts, playing as Genghis Khan gave John Wayne cancer. That's kind of sad. Is it? John Wayne was a terrible person. John Wayne was, like, actually a pile of shit. Like, and here's the thing. I grew up really liking John Wayne. Like, I had a John Wayne poster in my room for years. Like, I loved old Westerns growing up. And, man, fuck John Wayne. Like, let me tell you, it really sucks that John Wayne somehow gets, and it's because of the Public Enemy song, but it really sucks that Elvis gets piled into John Wayne when Elvis had a lot of problematic shit for sure, but John Wayne was like an actual Nazi sympathizer. Like, John Wayne was an actual abhorrent racist. Elvis was not. Like, straight up, Elvis was not a racist. Like, I think, like, those are, it's such a weird thing. It's such a weird false equivalency. I see people do all the time. Anywho. I mean, the Kitsune Cavalier also, being a Republican was different back in Elvis's time. Like, I'm pretty sure Elvis died before Reagan was even in office, right? I feel like Reagan is really the, probably Nixon is probably the turning point for the Republican Party. So Reagan really cemented that, though. Doggo. I'm doing a stream. Lady's just sitting here wagging her tail at me. I love you so much. I love you so much. You're being such a booger. Okay. From the Manchester Historian, whenever anyone imagines the Wild West, certain images are always conjured up. A heroic gun-toting cowboy, probably John Wayne. See, what have we been talking about? There are many explanations as to why Americans began to migrate west. There were the political motivations of America's manifest destiny to colonize westward and civilize the indigenous population. Another motivation was economics, declining opportunities on the eastern seaboard, and economic recessions due migration west with the promise of opportunity, particularly in the 1848 gold rushes and with the rise of ranching. People forget that so plentiful, like it's truly crazy when you think about how we colonized. Dog, okay, you gotta go. Be good. Be good then. Come on. Right, come here. Good girl. I love you. I love you. Yes, I do. Okay, give 1 second. Okay. Dog is in prison. Cishet cowboy choice. Yeah, Elvis died in 1977. Elvis, Floyd, like, here's the thing. I'm not saying Elvis is not problematic, for sure. And it doesn't make it, like, the idea that, oh, well, you know, things were different back in the day. It's like, does not make him preying on teenage girls right. But what I'm saying is that do not call somebody racist if they're not actually racist, and do not pile somebody in with being a racist. Like, especially on the fucking level of goddamn John Wayne. Like, somebody who was openly racist to, Native women, even at like the Academy Awards. Oh. Ow. Okay. Manifest Destiny. Black and queer Americans also headed west, but for many additional reasons. For African Americans, the West presented an opportunity for freedom. Many initially headed west as fugitives, escaping southern plantations, and later as exodusters in the 1870s, fleeing Jim Crow. as exodusters in the 1870s fleeing Jim Crow. Queer people, as well as women, also headed west due to the horrors at home. Some fled sexual or domestic abuse, and others fled the growing rigidity of concepts of gender and sexuality. These groups were sold the promise of freedom in the West's colonization. Far from visions of white heroic masculinity, the West was filled with examples of representation. African Americans came to dominate the cowboy profession, with around 25% of cowboys being black in this period. This, plus the number of Latino and indigenous cowboys, demonstrates the West's diversity. This led some contemporaries to believe in a black spiritual affinity with the job. Some even became performers headlining shows and rodeos. Additionally, the West's lack of central authority was utilized by many to escape increasingly gendered codes of life. Ambitious women demonstrated this, free from conceptions of domesticity, exploited opportunities for businesses, like Mary Ilitch Long, who ran the first woman-owned zoo. Now, I do want to talk about this real quick. Others used the opportunity to create communities free from contemporary heterosexual and gendered expectations, with male minors in Camp Angel in Southern California holding dances dressed as women, wearing patches on their pants to signify their feminine role. And a lot of this stuff is other stuff that we will be talking about. And I want to go over to the Bandera Bulletin. I didn't know that about Elvis. My world is falling. Yeah, Elvis married a girl when I shouldn't say, because I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like he basically groomed a girl, and that, like, it sucks. It does. Like, hey, you want to know? Yeah, she was. That's why I didn't want to talk on it. I didn't want to say if she was like 14 or 6. I for some reason I was thinking 16, or 15. Hey, David Bowie did it too. If you really want me to ruin all of your heroes, David Bowie was out here like fucking kids when he was in his late 20s, early 30s. Oh, Stephen Mystery. Okay, well that's a little different. Stephen Mystery, he waited till she was 18 but met her when she was 14. Like, don't get me wrong, that's gross. Like, that's some Drake shit. I don't know. I don't want to get... I'm going to get distracted. Yeah, no, that is still, like, don't get me wrong, that's still grooming. That's also... But, like, there is a distinction between that and fucking somebody who's 14, which is the image I had in my head. Yeah, everybody thinks David Bowie's cool, and nobody remembers that he fucking, like, by his admittance and several other people who've come forward, was just fucking other people, like, fucking children, fucking underage girls, which just, it's fucking sucks. Yeah, that shit bugs me so much. Okay, sorry. Back on track from the Bandera Bulletin. As the LGBTQ community actively works for the rights and acceptance in today's society, it's easy to forget that homosexuality is not a contemporary development, but rather has been present among humans since the dawn of time. An examination of frontier life indeed shows that love between same-sex partners not only existed, but was acceptable just as today. Now, before I go forward, I do want to say that is not true in every context, and I think she does talk about it in certain areas. It was accepted in a way that wasn't really talked about, and we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get into bachelor marriages in a moment here. But widely, it was not accepted in the way that I think that sentence might lead one to think. There were not, pride parades. If you were gay, you kept it on the DL. Because in many places, due to overly Christian laws and the political structures of America, it was still illegal to be a homosexual. But that doesn't mean there weren't people who were homosexual. Anthony Schuler, why the fuck are there and have there been so many dang predators in friggin' Hollywood or Hollywood? Probably because positions of power, like they reward straight white men. Like people seek out positions where they can dominate and control others. Yeah, this is why I don't have any heroes, really. Or, no, this is why all my heroes are dead, is what I should have said. Like, I never have to worry about Ronnie James Dio. Like, I know his hands are clean. I'm good. Mr. Rogers, not a problem. Not a problematic guy. We're good. Hey. Bob Ross, another great example. Okay. And here's where it really gets important. The Wild West was certainly untamed and uncultivated. Frontier life was one of isolation and wide open spaces where the constraints of civilization were not felt on one's day-to-day life. In this environment, unconventional characters, lifestyles, and differing types of behavior became more common and acceptable. The strong belief to live independently and unencumbered by societal norms could be applied as much to sexual freedom as anything else. While little was written about it in the late 19th century, and with Hollywood movies only presenting a more sanitized version of the Old West, it's not surprising that this aspect of frontier life is not commonly known. Historian Peter Bogue, and we'll hear about a little bit more from him. He wrote a book that was incredibly illuminating for the subject. Historian Peter Bogue from the University of Colorado points out, quote, society didn't really designate people as homosexual or heterosexual through most of the 19th century. It was not really until the 20th century that those identities crystallized. Speaking from his 2003 book, Same-Sex Affairs, he explained to True West magazine, quote, in all men's societies, it was not unusual for same-sex relationships, and it was just as acceptable thing to do. People engaged in same-sex activities weren't seen as homosexuals. An environment where women were not often present, men sometimes displayed more erotic connections between themselves. A well-known example of this comes from a mining camp in South California that regularly held dances in which men danced with each other. We just heard about that. With some of the men wearing patches over their pants crotch to indicate their role as the feminine partner. As human sexuality was studied scientifically for the first time in the mid-20th century, it was revealed by Alfred Kinsey in his 1948 study, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, that homosexual behavior was more common in rural, more remote communities, most likely because the isolation of such places fostered a make-do attitude among pioneers and outdoor men. Homosexuality was not only common, but appears it wasn't considered a big deal among men who made do while living without female companions, with some cowboys even creating same-sex partnerships known as bachelor marriages. And I do want to talk about this a little bit. I'm not going to be going into indigenous life because I am keeping that as its own thing. I want to talk about indigenous history and indigenous life and different conceptions of gender, but not just here in America, because I think it's a wider conversation. And that's not to conflate different indigenous tribes and groups across the world, but I think there is something to be said for looking at the scale and the totality of the different approaches to gender all across the world outside of a very white Western conception. So one of these next weeks for Queer History, we will be covering that, but not today. So if you're wondering why I didn't cover any indigenous stuff, that is the reason why. There is plenty of ground there to cover, and we will get there. Now, this is from the website Notes from the Frontier. The fierce Western ethos to live free and unfettered applied as much to gender and sexual freedom as it did to other areas of life. Frontier life was one of isolation, wide open spaces, and lawlessness, and divergent behaviors were common. So it's not surprising that, even though Victorians didn't write about it, homosexuality was as common then as it is today. But because the Victorians avoided the topic, then Hollywood followed suit with its sanitized black and white depictions of the West. The icons of the rugged cowboy and Western life were sacrosanct and simplified, but modern research, archival photographs, memoirs, diaries, and more open attitudes have uncovered a shocking underworld of the West. We just talked about the Kinsey study. Today, it is found among ranchmen, cattlemen, prospectors, lumbermen, and farming groups in general that are virile and physically active. These are men who haven't faced the rigors of nature in the wild. They live on realities and on a minimum of theory. Such a background breeds the attitude that sex is sex. That was from the Kinsey study. Sorry, I meant to start here. What was perhaps most shocking about homosexuality in the Old West was not that it was so common, but that it wasn't a big deal. In fact, miners and cowboys settled into convenient partnerships called bachelor marriages. When the miners in Angel Camp in Northern California had dances, half the men wore bandanas around their arms to signal their feminine role. Also, patches around the crotch. We already heard about this. It was also very common and accepted for same-sex bedmates to sleep together in small beds. While homosexuality among whites arose from quiet acquiescence and sometimes necessity, Native American cultures enthusiastically embraced alternative genders. They called them Berdache or Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit, so here's something that you will hear on occasion from people trying to discredit the idea of Two-Spirit identities, is, oh, Two-Spirit was created in 1990, which is true. It was created by an indigenous Native woman as a umbrella term, as a term to encompass other tribes and their conceptions of gender and identities. So the next time you hear somebody, because transphobes love to do it, they like to Matt Walsh does it all the time, because he's just like terminally racist against indigenous Americans, where they will try and discredit that as if that is a newfangled idea. It's not. It is just a modern way to encompass an entire approach to life that was held by many different tribes across many different areas. Let me get to my... Now, we have that. And there aren't too terribly many. Oh, Guacamole, thank you for talking, or thank you for commenting. Yes, thanks for saying this. As a two-spirit person, it's really frustrating that people say it was made in 1990, not knowing why it was coined. Yeah, you're welcome. I did, like I said, I am doing other research for that aspect of queer history and indigenous lifestyles, and that's an important thing to bring up. It is like the idea of like using the word transgender, right? And people will say like, oh, trans is just a new thing. And it's like, no, the word transgender is because human society, we developed new words to encompass our advancements. We develop new ways of thinking and develop new words to communicate those, which is why we don't say transsexual anymore, because for a long time, that was actually the medical nomenclature. And now that is outdated. I've talked about this before with words like colored or oriental, right? Is like those aren't necessarily offensive, but they are outdated. Like we as society have just decided like, maybe not. Maybe we don't call people and things that. Maybe we move on and we do something else. Robin, thank you very much for super chatting $5. Teacher DD time, but in all seriousness, I'd love to have you as my history teacher. I would probably be a pretty cool teacher, honestly. If I've considered going into teaching, but I straight up don't have, like, I have the patience. I'm pretty patient with a lot of stuff, right? I would yell at parents. I would yell at parents. An angry goose. What's the status for Oriental when describing an object? I still see that from time to time. I think that is more acceptable. Like people use that to talk about mostly like antiquities, rugs, ornaments, Oriental rugs and stuff like that. I don't particularly know the level of acceptance. I would just try to find I would just try and find the most accurate way to say it is the thing. I think a large part of why Oriental in particular is kind of poo-pooed is that it's so undetermined, right? Like it is such a old pulp novel way of talking about a different part of the world. Like it is the mysterious Orient, and it's like, no, because you have a lot of different countries and unique different cultures and people all through Asia and Southwest Asia and Southeast Asia. Like there's so many different parts and places that to lump it all together, it's like I have family members who drive me up a fucking wall when, like, I remember this is gonna shock you guys. I went through like a big anime manga phase in like middle school. And they, like I have specific memories of my family members like calling anime or manga like Chinese, and I would have to be like, no, it's Japanese, and they would be like, same thing. And that's still like, there are still people out there who do shit like that, and it is like it's like that's the reason why we don't use Oriental. It's like, no, you have, everybody here has a supercomputer in your fucking pocket, like there is no, it's why I hate the idea of like, oh, somebody's just from a different generation. It's like, being old is no excuse for ignorance when you can literally, like, it cannot be any easier to learn new things. It literally cannot. You can talk to your phone, ask it a question, and it will give you all of the unlimited knowledge of human history on a subject. There is no excuse for ignorance. There just isn't. Straight up. Like, and that is why that shit yeah, exactly. And Angry Goose, there's some pretty cool old people and very uncool youngsters. How can I be more racist? John Bainbridge, fun fact, Orient comes from Latin oriens, meaning east. Yeah, and I did see somebody, and somebody already answered this up above, but I did see somebody asking where the term Orient came from. It came from a European, not a American conception, a European conception of where the world was. So anything to the east of Europe was considered the Orient at one point. Anyway, cultural ignorance aside, I wanted to talk a little bit about some more specific examples. Is James Moyer Franks a homosexual? I do not know. Oh my goodness, Azure Windress, that's a cute name. I took my GF at the time to a Chinese performance. It was amazing, but the entire time she kept comparing it to anime, and she was upset when I told her it wasn't okay. That's a... I thought that story would have a cuter ending, but it didn't. That is, that's a rough one. That's a rough one, Azure Windress. Thank you very much for $10. That's... I mean, like, the best thing I think you can say to that is, I think you should always try and be, especially if it's somebody that you're in a relationship with, especially if it's somebody that you love or have feelings for, you should always be willing to help them grow and understand why. Like that is that impatience is the most important part of that, because it's so easy for somebody to feel like you are belittling their intelligence, like you are trying to, like outwoke them or something, that you're trying to hold it over them, even if you're not. Like that isn't necessarily a problem on your part. It's just the way it can sound when somebody is saying, hey, you shouldn't do this. It's like a lot of people have that knee-jerk reaction. Instead of asking, okay, well, why shouldn't I do it? Instead, they go, well, who are you to tell me I can't do it? I think that's the kind of reaction you see from a lot of appropriately named reactionaries, people on the right, who you say like, oh, hey, you shouldn't say this. And you're like, well, why? Is it offensive? And it's like, okay, but if you actually sit down, and again, this is a thing you can't really do with reactionaries, but you can do with your partner. If you actually sit down and go, hey, here's why. And you actually find examples of that kind of racism and how it is manifested, particularly if you can find examples of, which we can, of how it is manifested in violent ways. You can go back and see there were attacks on Asian people around the start of COVID. Remember that? You can go back and see like the history of Chinese and Japanese people and the struggles they've had in America have been incredibly different, and both incredibly fucked up in different and unique ways that demand, I would say, to be respected and understood culturally. And ways that, again, too often, I think America, especially the education system, completely overlooks, right? Like, you don't learn, or I didn't learn, about the Chinese exclusion laws. About laws that were literally, Chinese and Asian exclusion laws that were literally created to stop emigration from specifically Asian countries. Like, people do not learn about things like the mass amounts of Chinese railroad workers who were literally worked to death building the railroad system that cemented the underpinnings of the entire nation's economy, right? People don't talk enough about, like, it's become this kind of like small trivia aside during World War II. But Japanese Americans were put in fucking internment camps. They had lives, entire houses, homes, belongings stolen from them by the American government. And in the grand scheme of things, these are things that people still, generations later, like, there are people who are still alive who went through these things. So it is like these distinctions are important to make. Yeah, Shibiri as well. I didn't know about the Japanese internment camps of World War II until I heard George Takei talking about growing up in one. Yeah. Like, it's that kind of, like, I remember learning about it in school, but it's not something that I don't think it's commonly taught. It's one of those things where, it's always at the end of the year. Like, oh God, American history class is something else, let me tell you. But John Bainbridge, to that point, John Bainbridge saying George Takei was in a concentration camp. He's spoken about it very publicly. Okay, but if George Takei wasn't famous, who would be there to speak out for those? Like I've already seen several people in the chat saying, oh, I know about it because George Takei. But if he wasn't famous, if he wasn't speaking out about it, about his personal experience, who else would be there to speak out for those things? And so it's important to understand it is important to understand those issues exactly for that reason, for helping to illuminate and create an understanding in others, not to hold it over anybody or to, I know a lot of right-wingers like to a lot of right-wingers like to say that, oh, you just want to make all white people feel bad. All white people are racist. And it's like, no. That's no. Let me say something here that's going to blow some right-wingers' minds about a leftist if they hear it. I don't hold what other people did 100 years ago over the heads of their descendants. I just don't. On the same token, I also don't believe that I am entitled to the achievements of people from hundreds of years ago. Like, see, my, I don't have that cognitive dissonance where a lot of people on the right will be like, oh yes, we white people, we built the West and we invented all this stuff, and they basically take credit for shit other people did, but they don't want to take credit for how racist those people were, or who those people built on the backs of, or who those people enslaved. Like, they want to take credit for the cool shit, not the bad shit they did. You understand? Yeah, GGGG, Americans are just shit about history. Like, it has nothing to do. Yeah. Anyway, gosh, we're off topic again. Although, no, this is a good topic. Because I think it still has a lot to do with, like, learning history, right? It's this is just a fractal to view American history through. It's just another tangent that so many of us, like queer history, so many of us didn't get the due diligence of in high school. We had no way, really, and it's not like I can blame American middle schoolers and high schoolers for not looking into this stuff on their own, unless they took a class on this in college. If you come out of college history classes not knowing about this stuff, that's a little bit different. But not everybody's going to take those specialized classes that are going to dig into these issues. And at the same time, if you don't know about them, even if you have that curiosity, even if you have that will to learn, how are you supposed to go out there unless you're going to literally look up, like, hey, what racist shit has happened in America's past? Davian, I might look into Freud at some point. Maybe we should do, if people like these kind of history streams I do, yeah, sure, maybe we'll look into other like tangents outside of queer history. Like, I've kind of been looking for new stuff to do just because I'm getting fucking tired of the current right wing like griftosphere. Oh. Costa Rica Clementine Pie is delicious. Bai should sponsor me. I've drank so much of their stuff on stream at this point. 100% auction. You've been focusing on the tangents the whole time. I have not. That's not true. I've gone through 3 articles. We're going. All right. No, I'm laser focused until the end, y'all. No more distractions, I promise. So, Out Traveler, the trans history of the Wild West you never knew. If you're like most people, the image that comes to mind is most likely cowboys, bandits, lassos, and straight people doing very straight things. But certainly the idea of people of color dressing in clothing for the opposite gender doesn't pop into the imagination of most individuals. However, many would be surprised to hear they'd be wrong to count transness out of what has made up America's new frontier. In fact, it was quite common. In his book, Redressing America's Frontier Past, historian Peter Bogue argues just this. The book happened by accident. When asked how his work came to be, Bogue responded that he had discovered there were men wearing women's attire while searching for a completely different project. In the end, Bogue wrote a book researching the lives of those living in this frontier, discovering hundreds of individuals living their lives as the opposite gender, coming to form a part of day-to-day life in the Old West. When asked whether he was surprised by this discovery, Bogue replied he was, despite being a historian on this period of American history, perhaps due to the way queer history has been covered up. As the article, The Forgotten Gender Nonconformists of the Old West, points out, many of these people, the vast majority of which were individuals assigned female at birth presenting as men, were often presenting as the opposite gender for practical reasons. Take a bandit trying to evade the law, for instance. Many of these individuals chose to dress as the opposite gender to evade detection from the authorities, sometimes going to live entire lives as the different gender following their life as an outlaw. Or take, for example, a woman living in the patriarchal world of the Old West, unable to receive a livable wage or work, confined to labor in the home, and treated as mere property. In such harsh conditions, many women found it better to simply live their lives as a man. Indeed, Bogue himself told me via email that many of the individuals he researched were not trans. However, Bogue also argues that although many of these individuals presented as the opposite gender for pure practicality, many also may have been what we consider today as transgender. Somebody earlier mentioned Harry Allen. Harry Allen is a great example of somebody who we didn't have words like transgender or even really transsexual at the time. But by every metric, Harry Allen was trans, and we'll talk about him in a moment. Shockingly, Bogue also found that most individuals were only discovered to have been trans upon their death. The article, The Forgotten History of the Wild West, in Atlas Obscura, lays out the particularly funny case of Sammy Williams. Williams, who was assigned female at birth, presented and publicly identified as male to his hometown in Montana. He worked as a lumberjack in the area, furthering his male status to those around him. So, when he died at the ripe age of 80, many in the area were shocked to discover he had been trans. And I want to talk a little bit more. I have stories on most of these folks. And I want to jump right in to Sammy Williams. Shibarius, well, good night. Tuning in for the night. Got a history test. Have good luck on your history test. Thumb Warrior. Back in the days, there were only boys and fancy boys, no other genders. You know, that's actually not too far off. That's not too far off. Oh. Well, Morningstar... skirt, I don't know about shooting. I mean, so it depends on the skirt, right? Because a lot of Old West skirts, like, it depends. Like a hoop skirt, fucking forget about it. You can't move. Hoop skirts are stupid and ridiculous. But a lot of skirts and female attire was very restricting and limiting. So somebody asking, how would a skirt restrict your ability to shoot? Well, you might not even be able to lean down. But you certainly wouldn't be able to, and this is something that for shooting and hunting especially, you wouldn't be able to crouch in a skirt, generally speaking. It's why a lot of women had to also ride side saddle, which, for those who don't know, side saddle when you ride a horse is when a woman is turned to one side or the other, so she's not actually mounting the horse, she's just kind of sitting on it sideways, because like there's not enough fabric between the skirt for it to actually spread. Like, which led to, oh my goodness. And this, old-timey skirt. Never mind, I thought modern. I'm pretty sure they're talking about old-timey skirt. A modern skirt, like, you shouldn't have a problem with. Modern skirts, we've figured out how to make skirts shootable. But no, old-timey skirts are like that. That is why you would see, what we're about to see here. Damnable bustle. This make me. I want to play some Red Dead. I might play some Red Dead after this. I like. Oh, speaking of, let me actually pull up really quick. I have a video to recommend everybody. If you guys want some, I used this for a little bit, but I didn't want to take too much from it because it's very comprehensive, and I feel I would have covered most of it. But go and look up a video by, if it will load. Kaz
to the American
Rowe.
white supremacist concept.
Okay. Kaz Rowe has a video called Exploring the Queer History of the Old West, Yeehaw, from 2 years ago. Kaz Rowe, Kazrowe. I did not know this channel before this, and I thought the video was absolutely lovely. I thought it was fantastic. If this kind of history intrigues you, I cannot recommend that video enough. It's much more in depth than this is going to be. Back again. Hey, Kinetheus. Now, over to Sammy Williams from explorebigsky.com. About the only thing that can be said for certain about Sammy Williams is that he died in Manhattan, Montana on December 10th, 1908. Even how Williams died, his name and the rest of his life story are conflicting, murky, or uncertain. Now, this is something, before continuing, this is something that is incredibly important to remember here, because there is no telling. We're going to get to a story in a little bit of old Nash, and for those of us who already know that story, don't post anything in the chat, because I think it's a fantastic story. But old Nash, for those who don't know, was a trans woman who was only known by that name. Nobody knew her real name, where she came from before where she ended up. And this is really how we talked a little bit earlier about the kind of the westward promise of manifest destiny, westward expansion, but also in one of the earlier articles we mentioned how black people, gender nonconforming people, queer people sought out lives in the West because it was a place where nobody knew them. This is the kind of thing where you get the origins of these stories, the archetypes of the Western genre, of the mysterious stranger rolling into town. Are they good? Are they bad? Mysterious bounty hunters. Everything is mysterious in Westerns because there's no telling where somebody came from, where they're on their way to, what kind of trouble has followed them into town. Now, those make great dramatic setups, but in a microcosm, they were also true about so many people. And for that reason, so much of these people's past in history has been lost, both before they died and after they died. And that is a great example here of Sam Williams, and is another thing that's important to keep in mind as we continue talking about more of these people, just to imagine how many people were lost on trails, were lost in the woods, were gunned down in a saloon bar fight, were given a shallow grave out in the desert. Whatever Western nonsense befell them, and we'll never know if they were queer. They never had their chance to tell their story. So those are also important things to think about. What can be said beyond the date of Sammy's death is that the local undertaker, George R. Safely, was shocked to learn as he prepared the affable, longtime community member for burial that Sammy had the anatomy of a woman, despite being known to everyone as a man. Hardly knowing what to do, the members of the community, many who had been helped by Sammy's famous charity, chipped in for a headstone that still sits in Meadowview Cemetery south of Manhattan. Quote, "A female whose real name is unknown, but who has been for many years known as Sammy Williams. Died December 10th, 1908, age around 68 years." Though no one can say anything about Williams' reasons for arriving in Montana, although escape seems the most plausible, we know that when he came to Montana, he was accepted and loved, remembered for doing what any wild and woolly cook would do when arriving in Gallatin Valley. He was known for loving to dance with the ladies, enjoying a stiff drink without ever getting drunk, and for being a great cook. When Sammy died, there was an outpouring of grief from the men who worked the Hebe Ranch in Manhattan. Williams was known for caring for those who were sick, and some reported that at their most destitute moments, they would find $5 or $10 in their pocket, the quiet charity of Sammy. And he also voted. Charlotte Mills, the former clerk and recorder of Gallatin County, works as a part-time volunteer at the Gallatin Historical Museum and has helped research Dr. Rachel Phillips dig for clues about Williams' past. In most elections, Phillips said, women were not allowed to vote except for certain races like school boards. In Montana, women secured the right to vote in 1914, ahead of the franchise going nationwide in 1920. However, polling books showed that Sammy voted at least 3 times in elections in Gallatin County before 1900s, and he also had land, 320 acres, which he held at the time of his death. As county property records show, his estate was auctioned off, and in a handwritten note, it said the land belonged to Sammy H. Williams, a female. Now, there's a couple important things here. Well, John Bainbridge, it's not that Sammy ran a charity, it's that Sammy was charitable. Yeah, it's not that Sammy had a specific charity. It's that if Sammy saw his coworkers struggling, if he knew that, you know, the men he worked with were down on their luck, he would give them $5 or $10 because that is just the kind of person he was. Already, there are so many things to talk about here. Among them being how trans people are treated after their death posthumously, which it shouldn't be surprised in a patriarchal society like we talked about earlier that if somebody is revealed to be a female, then suddenly the land becomes up for grabs. They put it on his tombstone, which is just like, it is disappointing, but it's something to remember that it was also not just surprising, not just incredibly unheard of and uncommon. Like this is the kind of case that when you were talking about people who live their entire lives out on the range, out in these small towns, helping to build them up, the idea of a trans person is something that, while it existed, I mean, obviously it existed, it was something that you couldn't guarantee anybody had ever even heard of, even in disparaging tones. It was something that was so unnormalized for so many people. Wasn't land up for grabs just because he dies? Would it have been different if it was cis? Calla Lily TV, it would go to his next of kin. It should go to his next of kin. I do not believe he married or had a next of kin. But also, Calla Lily, you might be right there, because he was revealed to be AFAB. Legally, there might have been something there that was like, oh, well, women can't own land, so technically he couldn't own land either. Like, I'm sure it was some kind of nonsense like that. But the most important thing, and the most important thing that I want people to walk away from with these lessons about these people, is how they were regarded when they were still alive by their community and afterwards. The fact that Sammy was revealed to be AFAB did not stop his coworkers, the men he worked with, from remembering him fondly. Did not stop them from chipping in to buy a nice big tombstone when he passed away. It is important to remember the effect that actually knowing trans and queer people has on those around them. Actually understanding who they are, as opposed to just being told about them, which we see a lot today. People like Libs of TikTok, people like Matt Walsh do not actually know trans people. They do not actually know queer people. But even back in the Old West, people who knew trans people, queer people, even if they originally didn't know they were trans or queer, they worked alongside them. They were in communities with them. They were helped and helped them when they were sick and poor. They sat at tables and ate food with them, and they understood at the end of the day that even if they were different in some ways, ultimately they were still a part of that community, still a part of that family. And to me, that shows the importance of integration, of coming to understand other people and other groups. Going back to Sammy real quick. Sammy's story is really one told in two halves. Okay. So this was actually In the late 1850s, census records in Eau Claire, Wisconsin show a Billy Williams who arrived to work as a camp cook for the area's thriving timber industry. Williams is recorded as a small, delicate-looking man with black hair, a feminine voice, and slightly hunched back. Billy frequently went out with the lumberjacks, where never hesitated to dance with the girls and spend his money. While he loved to drink and have a good time with his buddies, he was always careful never to become intoxicated, wrote Phillips in an article for Bozeman magazine in March 2017. Word quickly spread about Billy's talent as a cook, and nearby logging camps hired him without delay. As a cook for nearly 30 years, he acquired a lot of money, which he used to purchase buildings and lots in Eau Claire, a rarity that caught the attention of town leaders. Billy Cook was noted for speaking Norwegian, English, and German fluently, as well as picking up languages of the Native Americans in the area. Okay. Trouble came to Wisconsin when a family moved from not-so-distant Iowa to Eau Claire and noticed Billy's remarkable resemblance to the Weaken family. Word got back to Iowa, and one of the Weaken brothers was sent to Eau Claire to persuade Billy to return home. Billy made one last trip to Eau Claire back to Iowa, dressed as a tramp to apparently get one final look at his parents and his former fiancée and his wife. From there, Billy went farther west, looking in North Dakota for several years before Sammy landed in Manhattan. It was there that Henry Hebe, a horse and cattle rancher, was in need of a ranch cook to replace his former employee who was getting older and wanted to return to his homeland of China. Williams' motives, his reasons, and even his backstory are vexingly elusive and simultaneously alluring, leading historians to think as much about what isn't known as what is. For 18 years, Sammy cooked and worked for different ranch outfits, Phillip records, including the Hebe Ranch, the Meadowbrook Ranch, the No. 1 Ranch, and the Manhattan Company. He chewed tobacco and slept in the bunkhouse with the hired hands. One source claims he was the first to get up in the morning and last to climb up to bed at night, changing his clothes in the dark while others slept. The mystery of the former identity of Williams was only learned after his death, when a local Gallatin County jeweler, C.J. Odell, believed that he had seen Sammy years before in Eau Claire. The Eau Claire chief of police was later able to fill in the details, recalling that Billy had disappeared shortly after his connection to the Weaken family was discovered. It's important to note he lived a different life than many others, but from all accounts, it was fulfilling, and he died surrounded by friends. Oh. I don't know why I'm so sniffly today. The allergies are just kicking my ass today. Okay, so that is Sammy Williams. Now let's talk about Harry Allen. Yes, that was a female-to-male person. Morningstar option 89. We're talking about another female-to-male person. Recently, Montana's Department of Health and Human Services passed an emergency rule barring Montanans from correcting the gender markers on their birth certificates. This bill and other anti-trans legislation would make Montana one of the harshest states in the country for trans folks. Just 2 states over for me right now. Natives of Montana and the Wild West tend to paint Montana as a harsh, hypermasculine place where traditional gender roles have always been upheld. This picture erases the history and culture of indigenous peoples who lived here long before settlers, and even within the scope of a settler narrative, it excludes queer people. The most recent attack on trans rights is no different. It aims to exclude loved and important members of our community. But trans and queer people have always been and will always be critical members of our communities. Their stories have just been erased. These are some stories from the Wild West that might challenge the traditional story you've been told about this region. And here we hear the story of Harry Allen. Union soldier, misanthropic, you are thinking of the Union soldier who is a trans woman. Old Nash. We are talking about Old Nash in a bit. Unless there's somebody else I'm thinking about. Harry Allen. Despite their presence, it would be inaccurate to say that the early West was a safe haven for queer people, a place where they were fully accepted and able to thrive freely. In actuality, people were arrested for not dressing according to their gender stereotype. However, it did offer more freedom than the strict societal rules in the East. During the early 1900s, Harry Allen was one of the trans people that came west to make a life for himself, and he ended up being one of the most notorious men in the West. He was known for gambling, stealing, fighting, bootlegging, and vagrancy. Vagrancy was a vague charge given to people who weren't conforming with society's rules. In Harry's case, this was for not dressing with his assigned gender. He was quoted in a 1908 issue of the Seattle Sunday Times saying, quote, "I did not like to be a girl, did not feel like a girl, and never did look like a girl, so it seemed impossible to make myself a girl. And, sick at heart over the thought that I would be an outcast of the feminine gender, I conceived the idea of making myself a man." Harry was in and out of jail for most of his life, but he also made quite a life for himself. He worked as a bartender, barber, and longshoreman. Allen never married, but he had a long-term partner, a sex worker looking for a different life with Allen. Allen's story is relatively well known because he was so notorious and newspapers latched onto his story wherever he traveled. There are other stories, however, of queer and trans people who lived quiet, peaceful lives that didn't involve running from the law constantly. Now, two things with Harry Allen. One, there are multiple stories of his charm, let's say, with the ladies. There are at least 2 women who were documented to have threatened, I believe one of them followed through with it, who were documented to have threatened suicide when Harry Allen would leave town, like when he would be fleeing the law. And they would, essentially, they felt they were so in love with him that they would kill themselves if they couldn't be with him. Like that is like real Romeo and Juliet type shit. Is apparently how much the ladies loved Harry Allen. 2, Harry Allen is maybe the perfect example to point to when people say trans people are a new thing. Like, why didn't we have trans people 50 years ago? Why didn't we have trans people 100 years ago? We did. Harry Allen is to the letter, to the T, so to speak, a trans person. The idea that you can look at this quote. This quote is everything you need to hear. "I did not like to be a girl, did not feel like a girl, and never did look like a girl, so it seemed impossible to make myself a girl, and, sick at heart over the thought that I would be an outcast of the feminine gender, I conceived the idea of making myself a man." You can't really state it any more clearly than that, right? Like, that is somebody who feels wrong identifying in the way that they were assigned at birth, who felt right living as their truest self. Another one, Alan Hart, another classic of the Old West. Oh, I know. Somebody mentioned Julie Dubigny in the chat, and I'm like, okay, I know Julie Dubigny. I know who you're talking about. Okay, not quite the Old West, but I do know who you're talking about. It's just escaping the patriarchy. They see that exact quote and read it as he didn't want to be a girl because patriarchy. I mean, like you can I guess read the quote however you want, but that's a trans person speaking. Like there are examples of people who, tried to escape the patriarchy. That's I don't think that's an example of what that was. Alan Hart, 1890 to 1962. Alan L. Hart was an Oregon physician, researcher, and writer, and one of the first female-to-male transgender persons to undergo a hysterectomy in the United States and live the remainder of his life as a man. Born Alberta Lucille Hart in Halls Summit, Kansas, the only child of Albert and Edna Hart. After Albert Hart died in 1892 following typhoid fever, Edna and Alberta moved to Oregon. Edna remarried in 1895 and eventually settled in Albany. Hart, goddamn, that's a long way away from Kansas. Hart was considered a masculine child and identified himself more as a boy than as a girl. In 1908, he enrolled in Albany College, where he gravitated towards the sciences and joined the debate team, which, by the way, schooling for women was still like not a super big thing at this time. Like that was still a very progressive and masculine thing to try and pursue at the turn of the century. Where he gravitated towards the sciences and joined the debate team. He transferred to Stanford in 1910 and helped establish the first women's debate club there. Exposed to the culture of San Francisco, he adopted tailored clothing and masculine habits. Based. Returned to Albany and graduated in 1912. The following year, he enrolled to the University of Oregon Medical School, where he graduated in 1917. He was the first woman to receive the Sailor Medal for achieving the highest standing in all departments of the school. It was during his time in medical school that Hart realized that his attraction to women was considered abnormal by contemporary society. After his graduation, he sought psychiatric help from one of his professions, J. Allen Gilbert, whose treatment of Hart is documented in his 1920 case study, Homosexuality and Its Treatment. Hart discussed his sexual orientation with Gilbert, who at first tried analysis and hypnosis as a means of reverting his sexuality. It's so fucking funny. Like, it's funny to look at how medical approaches to sex and gender have advanced. Because you have people like this, right? Where at a time, there used to be a time in science, in medicine, where you would go to a doctor and be like, "Doctor, I like women," or "Doctor, I like men," and they would go, "Okay, let me hammer your brain, or let me put you in deep hypnosis." And it's like we've come so far, and all we really needed to do was try and understand more instead of trying to change the way people are. And it is this kind of like I think it's these outdated notions. Whenever you see like transphobes or somebody online say like, "You need to go to therapy," like I have a bunch of them in my on the video I just did talking to homophobes at Pride, where people are like, "You need therapy, you need this, that, and the other," just because I'm trans. And it's like, yeah, therapy said like, "Okay, you're trans, cool." Like there's this outdated notion of medicine I think they've internalized that is meant to be corrective rather than prescriptive. Hart asked Gilbert to perform a full hysterectomy on him, citing a eugenic argument that persons with abnormal inversions be sterilized. Following the procedure in winter of 1917 to 18, he had his hair cut and acquired a male wardrobe. Oof. I'm sorry. Give me a second. I do not feel well all of a sudden. I will be right back. Yeah, okay. I'm okay. I'm gonna yeah, Morningstar option 89. I have a weird like I don't know, is there's like a kind of a weird feeling in my chest, but I don't know. I'm gonna go fill up on water. Drinking water always helps. Hey puppy. Hey puppy dog. My little puppy dog. My little puppy dog. Come here, my little puppy dog. Yeah, there's my good girl. Come on, up, uppies, uppies, uppies. Good girl. Good dog. Yeah, I think I'm gonna finish this up and then probably log out. Holy shit, I'm sorry. I just feel fucking terrible all of a sudden. Like I do not know why. Okay, finish this up. I have this, and then two more things, and then we will be three more things, but we'll get. Now I got hiccups. Come on, man. Hysterectomy. With the transformation, following the procedure in the winter of 1917 to 18, he had his hair cut and acquired a male wardrobe. With that transformation, Alberta Lucille Hart became Alan L. Hart. Quote, she made her exit as a female, Gilbert wrote, and started as a male with a new hold on life and ambitions worthy of her high degree of intellectuality. In early 1918, Hart eloped with Inez Stark, a public school teacher from Independence. That July, he received his Oregon medical license and moved to Gardiner with plans to take over a practice. A former classmate recognized him, however, and told people that he had once been a woman, and so he abandoned his practice. The couple moved frequently, living in states across the West, as they often left towns whenever Hart's gender was called into question. By 1923, the marriage had collapsed. Inez later filed for divorce. Alan Hart returned to Oregon and enrolled in summer writing courses at the University of Oregon, where he met Edna Rudick. The couple married in New York in 1925. In 1928, Hart received a master's degree in radiology from the University of Pennsylvania and was named director of radiology at Tacoma General Hospital. So he was basically a fucking genius. Like, incredible. Lana Mordra, thank you very much for subscribing for Prime for 5 months. Working for several years as a tuberculosis consultant in Washington and Idaho, moved with his wife to Hartford, Connecticut, where he received a master's degree in public. He's still receiving degrees in 1948. Good God. Like 20 years after, over 20 years after the first degree. Served as the director of hospitalization and rehabilitation at the Connecticut State Tuberculosis Commission and continued to dedicate his professional life to tuberculosis research. When synthetic male hormones became available after World War II, Hart used them to grow facial hair and obtain a deeper voice. Alan Hart died from heart failure on July 1st, 1962 in Hartford. When Edna died 20 years later, in March 21st, 1982, she left the majority of her estate to the Medical Research Foundation of Oregon in memory of her husband. Scholarship has disagreed on the identification of Hart as transgender, transsexual, or lesbian. Jonathan Katz was the first historian to identify Hart as the H in J. Allen Gilbert's 1920 case study. In his 1976 Gay American History, Katz described Hart as a lesbian. Others have identified him as transsexual or transgender, as he worked to keep his life prior to 1917 a secret and lived exclusively as a man following his transition. Now, 1976, calling somebody like Hart a lesbian would that's a very 1976 thing to do, right? Like, that is the most 1976 gay culture thing to do, to not consider trans people, to not consider them even really part of that same movement or community. However, we know better now, and pretty much much like Harry Allen, Alan Hart is a example that you look at and you're like, that's a trans man. Like, I'm sorry, somebody who goes through life, who is happy with their life, being born a woman, and feeling more fulfilled and finding more happiness as a man, who the second T becomes available, he grows a beard and gets a deeper voice. Like, come on, son. Get out of here saying that's a lesbian. Now, I want to talk about, because somebody brought her up earlier, I want to talk about Old Nash. Which is a fascinating story of a trans woman in the Old West. Like Old Nash is another great example of just the power of community, the power, the effect that just knowing somebody can have on whether you judge them or judge them not for being trans. On October 30th, 1878, one of the most famous army laundresses passed away. During her life, she was beloved by nearly all men who met her, and would quickly be favored by Libby Custer, who is the wife of General George Armstrong Custer. But with her death, a mystery would surface, one that captured the entire nation. Mrs. Nash had been born male. Little is known about the early life of Mrs. Nash. Her birth name has been lost to history, as well as much of her past. A little has survived, though. It was said she was from Mexico, where she was once married, had 2 children, who passed away while still young. It appeared that at this time she had lived as a man, driving ox teams over the Santa Fe Trail to New Mexico. Eventually, Mrs. Nash would find her way to Elizabethtown, Kentucky, where she found a position as a laundress with the U.S. Army in 1866. Have a good rest of your night, Logan. Nash would gain a reputation as being not only an excellent laundress, but also a talented seamstress who tailored officers' uniforms. A noted baker whose pies were much sought after, and a dependable nurse and midwife who, quote, few births occurred on the post without her expert help. Making $17 a month as a laundress, which is like fucking bank back in the day, which was more than a private in the Army, as well as her work on the side, Nash would build up a sizable nest egg. It may not have been the first time she had worked her way to a fortune, though. She would later say that her first husband had earlier abandoned her, taking all of her money in the process. Nash was not known for external beauty. People would comment on her angular shape and awkward gait, as well as her coarse and stubborn beard. John Berkman, George Custer's striker, described her as funny-looking. Libby Custer described her in a different fashion. This is fucked up and rude. This is like rude in such a, again, like this is, you have to view this in the time, in which it was said, where this is like the nicest thing anybody's ever said about another person. Essentially, and it's certainly in contrast to the ideas that there were no trans people, that there was nobody out there who is gender nonconforming, that there haven't been trans people all through history, which like verifiably that's untrue. Libby Custer described her, quote, "I shuddered when I spoke to her, for the woman was a Mexican, and like the rest of that hairy tribe, she had so coarse and stubborn a beard that her chin had a little blue look after shaving, in a marked contrast to her swarthy face. She was tall, angular, awkward, and seemingly coarse. But I knew her to be tender-hearted. She always came at night, and when I went out to pay her, she was very shy and kept a veil pinned around her lower face." Nash would remain veiled, covering her face when going into public. Catherine Gibson, widow of Captain Francis M. Gibson of the 7th Cavalry, attributed it to Nash's Latin heritage, in describing why Catherine wrote, quote, "So bad these winds," she complained, "for a young girl's complexion," which, though true, was surprising in as much as she had passed her pristine youth. She had multiple marriages. The first 2 husbands apparently ran away with her fortune. On April 3rd, 1871, the 7th Cavalry arrived in Elizabethtown, and on September 3rd, George Custer took command. They had been assigned to the southern city in order to deal with the Ku Klux Klan and illicit distilleries. For Nash, it would be a turning point. Arriving with Custer, Libby would first meet Nash. Immediately, Libby formed an admiration for the laundress. Being a friendly relationship, Libby would learn of the trials and tribulations of Nash, including her failed marriages. Along with striking a friendship with Libby, Nash would also meet her third husband, Sergeant James Nash. James was the personal servant to Libby's brother-in-law, Captain Tom Custer, and quickly fell for Nash. In 1872, the two were married. The two would be seen arguing a great deal, but they still seemed happy nonetheless. Attending military balls, where Nash was said to have constant partners, as well as other social functions, the marriage seemed to be a success. Nearly a year into their marriage, the 7th was ordered to Dakota Territory, and on June 10, 1873, Nash and her husband arrived at Fort Rice, where they would stay until they were transferred to Fort Abraham Lincoln on September 21st. In Dakota Territory, Nash would prosper, but not with James. As with her previous husbands, James would also desert Nash, taking with him her substantial savings. James leaving didn't go unnoticed, though. Libby would write that her brother-in-law was very put out by the desertion. While Nash may have grieved for the loss of at least a third husband as well as her savings, she would quickly rebound, marrying Sergeant John Noonan by the end of the same year. Noonan, as noted by Libby, was the handsomest soldier in the company, and was often admired for his admirably fitting uniform Nash had made for him, which displayed to advantage his well-proportioned figure. So, basically what George Custer's wife is saying here is she married the hottest soldier and then made him look good as hell with her tailoring. Nash, now often called Old Mrs. Nash, kept a bright and tidy home for Noonan, planting and maintaining a flower garden in front of their modest quarters. She made a home for the two of them, which became the center of the social circle in Suds Row, which was east of the Fort Lincoln parade grounds. The two would escape disaster in 1876 when Custer and his men set off for the Battle of Little Bighorn. Serving with the detached unit at the Yellowstone Depot, Noonan would return safely home to Nash after the battle, as opposed to literally everybody else. Crackhead Jimmy, have a good rest of your night. John Bainbridge, what is up with all these dudes robbing her? Because she made money. Like, she was good at her job. She made a shit ton of money being a seamstress and doing other odd jobs like midwifery. And like they would just take it. Like she was making more than a private in the army. Like she was doing good. And I mean, and again, like we were talking about earlier, this was a time where if you were able to just take money, if you had money in a horse, You can fucking go anywhere. You can do anything. As long as you got far enough away and nobody recognized you, you could kind of you could say, "Oh, I'm from this." You can make up your own backstory. You could be whoever you wanted. That's why it was the land of opportunity, so to speak. The couple, excuse me, sorry. The couple would have 2 additional years of happily being married, but the end eventually came. In the fall of 1878, Noonan was sent out on patrol in pursuit of a party of rebellious indigenous people. While her husband was away, Nash suddenly fell ill from what is believed to be appendicitis. As Nash's condition worsened, she called for a priest and instructed those who cared for her that she wanted to be buried as she was. She did not want the normal preparations for her burial. Seeing that a great loss would soon come upon the fort, many would begin to mourn her imminent passing. As Gibbons writes, though, that mourning would, for some, turn to indignation. People demanded what right she had to make a glutton of herself on unripe corn when so many were dependent on her skillful Latin fingers for delicate laundering. Besides, the stork was threatening to alight at any moment upon several chimneys. It wasn't fair, they all contended. So basically, what that is saying there is that, God damn it, why'd you have to go and make yourself sick? Because so many people here depend on you. Like we have multiple babies coming and we need you. Like that is I don't know if that's indignation so much as that seems like a very tongue-in-cheek way to express regret. Like that seems less sincere than it does half-hearted. Oh, Morningstar option. I'm doing better now. I am feeling a little bit better. I am okay. I'm very panicky, or I'm very in tune with myself. Like I said, water helps everything. Libby would relate it. Oh, wait, no. Wanting to show Nash the proper respect that she deserved by cleaning her up, her closest friends removed her clothing and discovered that Nash wasn't really a man. That's not the right way to phrase it. Discovered that Nash had been born a man. Berkman noted, "We was flabbergasted." Libby would relate it in much kinder words. Quote, "The mystery which the old creature had guarded for so many years, through a life always public and conspicuous, was revealed. Old Nash, years before, becoming weary of the laborious life of a man, had assumed the disguise of a woman and hoped to carry the secret to her grave." End quote. The news quickly spread throughout the country as a dispatch from Bismarck, Dakota Territory informed the nation, quote, "A singular development transpired at Fort Lincoln today. Miss Sergeant Noonan, who died last night, turns out to be a man. There is no explanation of the unnatural union except that the supposed Mexican woman was worth $10,000 and was able to buy her husband's silence. She has been with the 7th Cavalry 9 years." End quote. Noonan wouldn't inherit the fortune from his wife, but instead Nash had given it all to Bismarck Catholic Church. Instead, upon returning to the sad news that his wife has passed away, Noonan was greeted by unrelenting harassment and ridicule from his fellow soldiers. Having just lost the person he loved, who he called his wife, and no longer being able to stand the company of his fellow soldiers, Noonan quickly withdrew. Avoiding others, he busied himself by cleaning the stables south of Fort Lincoln. On November 28th, a reporter from the Bismarck Tribune was finally able to locate Noonan. He was adamant that, quote, he didn't know his wife was a man. In face, he said that they had been trying very hard to have a baby. Another mystery was at hand, though, according to Noonan. Quote, "There's some terrible mystery about this thing that I can't understand. She had acted as a midwife and doctress here at the post. She was trusted and respected by a large number of people, and I can only think that she must have done something terribly wrong which demanded a disguise of her sex by the diagnosing physicians." End quote. Shortly after, Noonan did end up killing himself. Bismarck Tribune were fucking dicks. Jesus. Years later, it was clear that Noonan's fellow troopers were far from having been relieved by his suicide, but Berkman said they were terribly ashamed. Quote, "Noonan's troubles meant just as much to him as though he'd been a major. Hundreds of graves scattered over Dakota and Montana of men that's never been missed, never been writ up, but they was good soldiers just the same. And without 'em, there wouldn't have been no country, maybe." Noonan would be buried with his fellow soldiers, first at Fort Lincoln and later reinterred at the Custer Battlefield National Cemetery, where a bit of the honors stripped away from his fellow soldiers was returned. Nash would also be buried at Fort Lincoln, but upon the fort's closing, would not be accompanying her husband. Instead, as with the other unclaimed civilian bodies, she was moved to St. Mary's Cemetery to be laid in an unmarked grave in Section D between row 1 and 11. And much like with Harry Allen, much like with the other people we've looked at, there are so many people who don't understand. And the first reaction to that non-understanding is prejudice and bigotry. But again, the people who knew old Nash, Libby Custer, who was her friend, upon hearing the news that wasn't featured in this article, but I'm quoting it for another thing I'm working on. Upon hearing the news that old Nash had been born a man, had been AMAB, assigned male at birth, Libby Custer's just said, "Poor dear, I hope she's comfortable." 1800s. A friend respecting a trans woman's pronouns. I don't want to ever hear somebody saying like, "Oh, well, it's hard for me to get pronouns right." Like, if the wife of a Civil War general got pronouns right, I feel like somebody in 2024 can too. You know? And I want to read, because this is a very famous one. Of course, I saw people even mention it in the stream announcement. Sylvia Rusty, that is very well said. These people are queer ancestors, our families, and they lived wonderful lives despite the way bigots would try to make us believe. Yeah, like one of the most important things that I want people to walk away from, hearing about all of these lives, hearing about the trans people, the queer people, the gay cowboys, is the understanding that people like us, people like me, people like many of you have always been an integral part of American society, of every society. And despite the best efforts to wash away our contributions, the fact that we have been good people, that we have been members of our community, that we have cared for others, has superseded any prejudice, any hate, any bigotry, and fear of outsiders. The reason why we know many of these stories is because of how loved and respected they were in their communities. Because the people who knew them loved and respected them. Oh, goodness. Now, I want to read one last poem. Oh, hello, dog. Dog is like, okay, you know, but you're done now. Hello. Hello. I love you. I love you very much. I love you very much. Little puppy. Little puppy. And this is a famous poem about gay cowboys. And I feel like it would be a fitting way to close things out, called The Lost Partner. I ride alone and hate the boys I meet. Today, some way, their laughin' hurts me so. I hate the mockingbirds on the mesquite, and yet I liked 'em just a week ago. I hate the steady sun that glares and glares. The bird songs make me sore. I seem the only thing on earth that cares, 'cause Al ain't here no more. 'Twas just a stumbling hoss, a tangled spur, and when I raised him up so limp and weak, one look before his eyes began to blur, and then the blood that wouldn't let him speak. And him so strong and yet so quick he died, and after year on year, when we had always trailed it side by side, he went and left me here. We loved each other in the way that men do, and never spoke about it, Al and me. But we both knowed, and knowing it so true, was more than any woman's kiss could be. We knowed, and if the way was smooth or rough, the weather shine or pour, while I had him, the rest seemed good enough, but he ain't here no more. What is there out beyond the last divide? Seems like that country must be cold and dim. He'd miss the sunny range he used to ride, and he'd miss me the same as I do him. It's no use thinking all I'd think or say could never make it clear. Out that dim trail that only leads one way, he's gone and left me here. The range is empty and the trails are blind, and I don't seem but half myself today. I wait to hear him riding up behind and feel his knee rub mine the good old way. He's dead, and what that means no man can tell. Some call it gone before. Where, I don't know, but God I know so well that he ain't here no more. And that is by Badger Clark. Incredibly famous poem. The youngest son of a popular Methodist minister of the Gold Rush era, Western poet, earned the title of South Dakota's first poet laureate. Yep. How's everybody doing? Y'all doing okay? Only moderately crying? Oh, ow. Oh. Kaya Lily, I think it might be. I'm still not feeling 100%. Yeah, no, people have speculated that they were talking about Al as a horse, but it's like, no, it literally says we love the way men do. Like that. It could, people have tried to say for years and years that, oh no, wait, no, he's not talking about a that's not a gay cowboy. They're talking about a horse, and it's like, I hope not. That's what I'm saying. Lana Mordreth, thank you very much for subscribing for 5 months. I am so sorry. Nobody go anywhere. Nobody, do not leave the stream. We are gonna go see who we're gonna raid. So nobody go anywhere. Don't do nothing. God, I hate the new fucking Twitch layout. It's so ass. It's so crazy how bad it is. Like it's fucking bonkers. All right, let's go. Everybody, we're gonna go raid Jack. Nope. God damn it. Sorry, give me a second. Yes. All right. Everybody, get in the raid boat. Go on Riverboat Jack. Go say hi. We love Jack. Go send some goats her way. And thank you all so much. Keep an eye out in the next couple days. I have some big things coming, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night.